Welcome to another Filmfest Bremen talk. My name is Ilona. I'm the artistic director of Filmfest Bremen, and it's my pleasure to meet with Michael Kamp today, live from Singapore. And he has a filming competition called Nursery Rhymes, and he's gonna talk a bit about with me what the film is about. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Ilona. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again too. You are live from Singapore, so what is it like? What time zone are you in? What's the weather like today in Singapore?
Singapore is either sunny or it's rainy, so that's the two options that we have. We don't have four seasons. Yeah. Currently, it's actually the end of the day. It's about 6:20 p.m. Yeah.
So yeah, it's around noon here, so a little bit of time difference. Your film is also taking place in Singapore. It takes us into the history of the country, and
Yes.
it's also a very personal film, I have the feeling. Like it's about your family history, but also the history of your country. So
Yes.
do you want to tell me a little bit about the background of the 3 chapters that your film has?
Okay. Maybe I'll just talk about why I made this film,
Yes.
just for starters. Basically, this is a bit of a love letter to my grandmothers. They've both passed away, and when my maternal grandmother actually passed away, she left me a little bit of money, not much, but basically something that I being the filmmaker that I am, I thought maybe I would use it to make a film instead. So that was really the starting point. And actually, the thing is that I have two paternal and a maternal grandmother, and they're both very different actually. My maternal grandmother is actually more of an Anglophile. She actually likes her family side was actually influenced a lot by Western culture, and the reason why is because actually they are what you call straight Chinese, in a sense that they were actually came down and assimilated with Malay culture, but at the same time they also took in a lot of the British language and the culture as well. And that actually, in the history of Singapore, when we were part of a colony, they were in a way in an advantageous position, because then in terms of business, in terms of administration, they actually were more well off in that sense because of that. So she has that sort of background in her life, whereas my paternal grandmother was more from ethnic Chinese background. So she, in contrast to my maternal grandmother, she can speak Malay, but she can also speak English very well, whereas my paternal grandmother actually just speaks pretty much all the time in Hokkien, which is an ethnic Chinese language. Yeah. So and in terms of their personality is also very different. So my maternal grandmother is actually more warm, more affectionate, whereas my other grandmother is actually a little bit more rough, a little bit grumpy, not easy to get along with actually. So all these elements, and then a little bit of their life history, a little bit of some of their memories, these things actually came together when I was thinking about how to make this film. And essentially, because Singapore is actually, before we became independent in 1965, we were actually under 2 countries. So the earlier part, we were under the British, and then subsequently under the Japanese. And so in my own imagination, I created that using their own memories, using research from what Singapore was about. I sort of created this short film.
So we see in the final scene of your film, we see your grandmothers together, right? So you can definitely tell the different characters that they had.
Yeah.
So these the stories you tell in the first and the second episode of the film about the time when Singapore was occupied, these were actually based on real stories your grandmothers experienced, or is it a little bit history you read and that you combined with their memories, or is it
Yes.
actual childhood memories of theirs?
You're actually correct. It's a combination of some of the things that they mentioned and also things that I read based on research, because like I was saying, my maternal grandmother came from a bit more of a wealthy background because of that sort of relationship that they had. And my great grandfather was a businessman. I mean, and through that interaction, they made some money. And having that sort of interaction, I would assume that there also would be some of these interactions with the British. And so that was how I created the story. Yeah. For the Japanese one, actually, what was interesting for me was my grandmother. She normally doesn't speak. I mean, she always speaks in Hokkien, the ethnic Chinese language. But then, actually, there was like one or 1.5 years before she passed on. There was a strange moment where she actually was in a happy mood and she was singing in Japanese. So that was something that really stuck in my mind, and that became something of an idea, a seed of an idea that helped me to create this story.
And I think it's obviously about a very specific point in time, but there's also some general issues or themes in your film. And also how you can see how children especially are influenced by their surroundings and their ways of putting up resistance to it, or to also find ways to cope with being different. Is that something you wanted to address in a more general term as well?
I mean, for me, maybe a little bit of history in the sense that for me, prior to this short film, I actually made 4 short films. And I kind of enjoyed working with children. So, and telling stories, not exactly children's stories, but children's stories involving children, and how exactly what you said, how they deal with certain types of adversities that they encounter. So I thought this was also thematically somewhat similar in that sense. And ultimately, I mean, it's like, to me, as a theme for this film, it's really about how when you face oppression, especially even if you look at it today as well, there's things that the shadows of imperialism and colonization that still rears its head. And at the end of the day, people still have to deal with it. And unfortunately, this is something that happens, and I just wanted to show that people still have to suffer, and people still have to live with this. And in Chinese, there's this word called 老百姓, the soul of the earth, the people, and they will still have to live with the powers that be, in that sort of circumstances. And that's something that I thought I felt strongly about when I made this film, because I prior to what we see now, actually, one of the references was I saw this photograph of a school. Actually, I think it was in Iraq, where they were setting up a school, and then an American general was with some Iraqi administrator. It was a photograph of them, and he's looking and inspecting that place. And that was a little bit of an influence when I created that scenario, the scenario for the second scene.
So yes, your film is in the competition for innovation, and I hope the jury will be as touched by it as I was personally. So thank you for submitting your film and being part of Filmfest Bremen. And yes, I hope you will join us in the online activities from Singapore, and I hope to see you again during the festival.
Yeah, thank you, Ilona.
Thank you.